welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching Network Africa here on Channels Television. Before we move on to Libya, here are some of the stories that we are tracking. At least 18 people have been killed in clashes between Christians and Muslims in the Central African Republic. 17 of the deaths occurred when a mainly Christian militia attacked a village in the northwest. Some 7,000 peacekeepers are battling to end the conflict, which has displaced about 25% of the population. Violence broke out in March 2013 after the Seleka rebel group, led by a Muslim, Michael Jotodia, seized power in the majority Christian country. Many women and children have been left homeless, and Seleka fighters have retreated to mainly Muslim areas in the north since losing power. Mr. Jotodia stepped down under international pressure in January. A prominent Libyan human rights lawyer and activist has been assassinated in a home in Benghazi. Armed men fought their way into the house of Sawa Bougagiz before shooting her. Mrs. Bougagiz was an outspoken critic of many of the armed groups which still control much of Libya. Her husband, Issam, has disappeared, and relatives believe he has been kidnapped. The killing is the latest in a string of attacks on politicians, activists, and journalists as well, who have spoken out against the actions of certain militias. Welcome back. Voting has ended in a Libyan general election marred by low turnout and threats of violence. Fewer than half of the eligible voters cast their ballots on Wednesday for a new parliament as the country seeks an end to the turmoil that has persisted since the overthrow of former leader Muammar Gaddafi. More than 1,600 candidates are running for the 200 seats in the new body, with 32 of the seats designated for women. The lawmakers will replace a parliament that was elected in 2012 and that many blame for the lingering instability that included a dispute over selecting a prime minister last month. No voting took place in the flashpoint city of Dana in the east, and some polls remain closed in at least 2 other areas. The militias that helped topple Gaddafi in 2011 have remained in Libya, carving out their own territories of control, and some taking control of key ports that have hurt the country's ability to export oil. Earlier, I spoke to political analyst Olabode Oseni, who believes Libya is heading in the right direction. But first, this report.
More than 1.5 million people have been registered to vote in the election. The figure is actually a lot less than the 2.8 who registered in the country's first election in 2012. Libya expects the new parliament will replace the General National Congress, a now controversial body plagued by political deadlock and the ideological battles that came up in the previous election. For Libya's Western partners, there is the hope that the election will help the country rebuild a viable state. Divisions need to be bridged between the country's western region, which was once favored by the late Gaddafi, who neglected the east, where many have been demanding autonomy and a greater share of the nation's wealth. The West is also worried that conflicts between militia and tribes will worsen. Its new army, still in training, is still no match for fighters hardened during the 8-month uprising against Gaddafi. Libya badly needs a functioning government and parliament. Apart from the powerful militia which grew after the Gaddafi ouster, the country is also struggling with a budget crisis. A wave of protests at oil fields and shipping ports by armed militia has reduced oil production, the country's lifeline, to a trickle.
It is a wonderful opportunity for the people of Libya. We must also not forget that living under dictatorship, you have been deprived of many of your rights. So for them to now, after the war, after the chaotic settings that led to the tribalism issue of breaking different areas, for them to wanting to come together now, I think is something that worth of our praise. We must appreciate that it is a process. Democratic settings, usually all over the world, it's a process that you cannot just overnight achieve it.
No, the report shows that the number of voters that registered this time around as compared to the last time that Libya tried to vote new sets of leaders in 2012 dropped by over 1 million voters. Can you still say that Libyans are optimistic about this
Yes.
process?
Judging from, again, is still a volatile, is unstable country. You know, I think all what they're trying to do is just to get themselves, their acts together and see how much they can put into the process of democracy. So the point here is there are less people now voting, but what is important here is the outcome of the vote and the result that will eventually generate a parliament that eventually the majority of the party that will eventually nominate and present a prime minister.
You know, the General National that's the
GNC.
Congress,
Yes.
has been on seat since the ousting of Muammar Gaddafi. And we all know that over time, about like twice, they've tried to produce a prime minister. And today they'll say, yes, we have a prime minister. And then the following they'll say, you know what? Prime minister, step down. You're no longer the prime minister. Can we trust this same GNC to step down for this new intakes?
For the people of Libya, coming together and say, you know what, we want to go for a proper election. We want to elect our parliamentarians and the process elect a new prime minister. I think the will of the people will be respected because the GNC, they are few, they are more or less in minority, so they're not going to have much say when the emergence of this parliamentarian election is conducted and fully, emerge that there's no argument, there's nothing. So I cannot see GNC having any upper hand on the new body.
For the past 3 years, after the ousting of Muammar Gaddafi, Libya has been in this problem, not being able to choose its own
Not stable.
leaders, unstable. What makes this election different? Why are you so optimistic that this will make all the difference for you?
Okay, I'll tell you. The population of Libya is less than 7 million. It's in their own interest to have a peaceful, coexistent Libya, because there's a lot to play with in Libya. So I cannot see if this election is not, if there are to be any problem, the catastrophe, the chaotic going back to what happened 3 years ago is not going to be in the interest of anybody.
That's right. To be fair, though, the Western world hasn't been directly involved since the ousting of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya.
Because they've been warned not to.
Yes, they've been, it's been all Libyan affair.
Yes.
Even this election has been, by the Libyans saying, no, let's elect our own leaders.
Yes.
And I think that's commendable. Thanks a lot for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you very much for having me. Ade Shewa. Pleasure being here.
Thank you. Finally on the program, the 2014 World Cup has been an exciting game so far. It has provided goals on a scale that is unprecedented. The average goals per game so far in the tournament has been put at 3.14. 3.14. No World Cup has averaged 3 goals a game since 1958. That's right. Now let's talk about Africa's performance at the World Cup. Nigeria is the only country that has weathered the tournament storm fairly well after playing a nerve-wracking 3-2 game with Argentina. Whew, tough game. I couldn't stop screaming. Though Nigeria lost, but thanks to Bosnia's win over Iran, which gave us the much-needed push to qualify for the next crucial round. Well, the yet-to-qualify African countries will need to play their hearts out. But beyond that, fan support has been reportedly researched to give psychological advantage to players. Although that fact remains contested. See how a family is supporting their favorite team in a rather unique way.
14 members of the Da Silva family who live near the capital, Brasilia, were born with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, thanks to a rare genetic condition. The family are proud of their additional digits, and they say they believe they can help the national team win their own 6th trophy.
Sim, com certeza, porque
Yes, of course, because we are giving so much energy for Brazil to win the cup, and I believe this energy will flow onto the pitch and they will play really well and win their 6th World Cup. Far from fearing discrimination, grandmother Silva Santos da Silva says family members born without the trait feel like the odd ones out. For example, my grandson, who has 5 fingers, feels excluded from the family. The family first announced their intention to boost Brazil with their 6 fingers on Facebook, and since then, they have enjoyed plenty of domestic media attention.
Well, support your team at the World Cup Africa with all you've got, I must add. That's Network Africa this week. You know we would like to hear from you. Send us a mail or text to the number and the email address on your screen. Head to channelstv.com or youtube.com/channelsweb if you missed any part of the program. Thanks a lot for watching. I am Adeshewa Josh.
A time comes in the life of every race when people are driven by echoes of the past to chant